Okay, councillors, we're going to move to town centre funding. We've held up Mr. Chairman Cowley all day long, so he's turned up here to observe proceedings.
Okay, so thanks, Mr. Chairman. So while I have a presentation on this, I'm not intending to go through it. I'm assuming that you've read the report and I'll give you the essence of it in 2 minutes. Essentially, the council's had this fund in place for 17 years, $10 per property across the district, which was allocated to the 4 towns in order of priority in terms of what their developments were going to be. We finished that cycle. The last one was Omakoroa, and that finished last year. It has been rated for funded this year, $230,000. It has not been allocated because going back a couple of years when the LTP was being undertaken, I put a paper up that says we need to consider how it to be utilised. The council at the time said, we'll come back to that, keep the money there, so keep the funding there, but we'll sort out the allocation in the future. So what essentially have come up with in terms of the future allocation is 2 options. One is just to repeat the cycle in 4 years at a time for each town, or secondly, to distribute it on a pro rata basis. And the pro rata basis I've suggested is the number of properties in each of those towns, which then becomes I guess, a pseudo driver for need about the size of those towns. And the town centre fund will potentially be reviewed in the next year or 2 through the economic strategy review that Rachel's team's doing. So if I was going to recommend anything for simplicity, I'd go do a pro rata distribution for the next year or 2, and then you do your review through the economic development strategy and decide what you want to do, whether you want to keep the same amount, less or more, and how you want to distribute it in the future.
Councillors, better go back to standing orders here to get some speaking orders. No, I'll take questions first and then we'll move towards resolution.
What's wrong with the present system?
Essentially, if you repeat your present system again, you're committed to that fund for the next 16 years. You may want to review it, and you are going to be doing a review of your economic strategy, and your review of your economic strategy may change your decision. Plus, when it was set up, each of the towns had a different timing as to when they needed to do the investment. So Te Puke was first and did the town centre upgrade, including their rating, using it from their rating funds. Then the timing was, if I remember right, Waihi Beach, then Katikati, and Omakoroa was last because it was seen it wasn't needed straight away. Where now each of the towns are in about the same phase, and so if a portion of funding goes to each of those towns, then those community boards can then allocate it to a smaller project they can fund, or it can top up the current funds they've got into a bigger project.
Rodney.
So my question is, what does the rest of the district get? Because this is raised district-wide. What do people like the Kaimais get out of this? Because they probably go nowhere near any of these 4 urban centres, yet they're funding it.
We get the same as what we've got for the last 16 years, Rodney.
Yeah.
And then Murray.
This here is showing for the financial year, the first one here that's nearly over. So why hasn't this come to us before? And being that, can we spend that 50,000 before the end of the financial year? And if not, or no, and the other thing is, if we're doing this, can we start storing it up to go to a substantial project like we had? The intention was that you had that significant pot that you have every 4 years that you can use. And when the review is going to be taken ahead, will the community boards be involved?
Okay, several questions there. So whether or not it gets actually spent before the end of the year depends on the individual projects. So I can't tell you that at the moment. Can you store it up? Under the current model, you can store it up. So, for example, Katikati can put it into its fund to go towards the Market Square development. Will the community boards be involved in the strategy review? Rachel can probably answer that. Will the community boards be involved in the economic strategy review? If it affects the town centre funds?
So the economic strategy review is a wider piece of work and will consider more than just the policy approach to the town centre rates. If the town centre rates are, so we've got one community, that being Katikati, that rates itself in addition to that rate that's included in the UAGC. There are other community boards, I think, that need to be involved in this discussion, namely Maketu Community Board and potentially other areas of our district that pay the town centre rate but don't have any say on this particular proposal that we need to be mindful of. So my suggestion would be, depending on what you do, if you're just looking for a holding pattern today, and it's thoroughly reviewed through the long-term plan process and the review of the economic strategy, then we would talk to community boards and other communities and other community leaders to garner their views in relation to it.
And the first question was, why did it just come to us now?
You know, it's the first time.
Give you the unpolitical version. No. No, well, it did exist, carry through. There was some debate. Mayor Weber was leading the charge to exit completely. So
Why now? So I'll answer the question. Why now was because I was probably time it came. So it was the first meeting of this committee. And it just didn't work out in terms of timing pre the election.
okay, Murray,
Close enough.
what do you got for us?
Thank you. I'm possibly the only community board chairman around the table that's actually spent one of these, still here. And so I would vote very strongly in favour of the big lump sum in the 4-yearly cycle, because it gave you the chance to actually do something. These tiddly little sums, splitting on a pro rata basis doesn't do that. And the other thing is, how do you decide on what is the population that uses the Amakara community? In my case, what is the population? How big is that catchment? Not the community board. I mean, there's people from the hinterland who also use the Amakara town centre. So how could you possibly fairly share it on a pro rata population basis? So I think we should just continue to let it roll over on the 4-year cycle, because it does give a.
Okay, we're straying past questions now. I was only looking for questions. Otherwise, we'll look towards a motion, and then everyone gets a chance to speak to it under our standing orders. Alan, do you have a question, or are you going to speak to it?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to follow up with the same question again as I asked the other day. Why weren't community boards put in this picture earlier? We've got, I think it's appeared in 2 community board agendas, so it hasn't appeared in 3. And if there's anything again that has an effect on a community board, or that a community board should be aware of and able to make some decisions or guidance on, it would be something that affects their town centre plan, for goodness sake, and how it's funded. So my question is, why was this done so out of sequence with the community boards?
My comment would be, though, this is a rate. You are councillors, you're elected, about the distribution of a rate. This is, sure, the community boards might have some part in the spending of it, but this is set by councillors. This is what you're elected for. This is a council activity. That's my opinion.
So, Mr. Chair, all I would say then is we are meeting here today to move the goalposts again.
Have you got a question?
Yes. What would be the option if it was wiped?
So if you chose not to continue with it, and even though it was in your long-term plan, if you chose not to continue with it, and I'd have to check with Rachel as to whether you can do that, you would just shift that the funds wouldn't be allocated this year. and you would pull them out of the budget for next year. And the funds from this year would go into the end of year surplus because they wouldn't be spent.
Right, Mayor James, you're going to lead the charge.
No, it's another question, and this is more of a hypothetical one because I think we're going to end up with quite a divergence of views here. You talk in the paper about the value $10 a year having been eroded by inflation over the last 20 years, whatever it is, and is there any possibility that should we so decide that could be increased to $20 at least, for the next 2 years?
Yes. So when I looked at it, I thought about it, I'm going, when it started, it had a significant effect. So 800,000 over 4 years had a big effect for Te Puke. 800,000 now to Te Puke would probably buy half the amount of work. So in hindsight, it probably should have been increased by $1 a year or something like that. So it kept relativity. But then it's your call when you're obviously considering your overall rating position as to whether you increase it or not.
Because I know this isn't in tomorrow's agenda as an issue, an option for the APLTP committee, and I'm not saying we're for or against doing that. It's certainly an option to make it more impactful for community boards.
You could. It might be a bit late to introduce it tomorrow, but it would increase the impact if it was a larger rate. But again, when it was set up, there was a concept for each of the towns, as I understand it, where it was required, and so timing was that basis. The one with the least concept at the time was Omokara because it was still in that development phase. You do have an option of just parking this. If you want to park it for a year, we can just hold it in abeyance, and you can decide next year what you want to do with it. And that means you can wait until the strategy review is done and just leave the money building up without increasing it. And then you have something to start with once you've done your strategy review.
Because it strikes me that actually if you park it and do the proportional side of it, the only people who lose out are Te Puke for in the short term. And frankly, they're about to do their community plan and spatial plan anyway, so that they're not about to go and spend it in the next year or two anyway.
And I'm probably my thinking was going that a proportional was probably more of a parking it than committing. If you commit to the same cycle, then it would feel like you're committed to the next 16 years. And I'm not sure you want to do that. So you can park it by holding it, or you can park it by proportional, and your proportional could be equal, or I've put it there on a number of properties, but that was just going, here's a starting point. But either would work.
For a starter, I don't normally do this as chair of a committee, but I am going to take the option to do this today, whether it gets a second or not. I believe option B is for a 1 year process, and then it will go on to the long-term plan, where I think its future should be thrashed out, plus the review that Rachel talked about. So I guess I'll talk to it in a second if anyone seconds it. I move option B as a one-off 1 year process to allocate the funds. Personally, I would have gone 30, 20, 20, but that's only from my for Katikati and Te Puke 30 each, and Omokara and Waihee Beach 20 each. But forget that. That's no justification other than just me being fair. So I'll move that option B as a one-off allocation, and then this gets referred to the long-term plan committee and Rachel's process. Do I have a seconder for that? I do, and Councillor. Oh, is it?
Recommendation 3.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page.
1, 2, and 4, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I wasn't on that page. Yep, I do, yep.
We're doing 1, 2, and either 3 or 4. We're doing 1, 2, and 4, is that correct?
4, yeah, 4 for starters. Right, speakers to that, please. Yeah, I have Mayor Denia second that. Councillor Granger.
I'd like to move an amendment.
Sure.
that the words in for number of properties in a community board area be struck out and the proportional basis to be agreed on. So I'm accepting your option 4, that it's allocated on a proportional basis, but without specifying the proportion, what the proportional basis is at the moment.
Well, that advance us before the end of the financial year. That's all.
I mean, it could be 25, 25, 25, it could be 30, 30, 20, 20, or whatever you said.
Oh, it's up to you
I-
to move something now if you want. If you want to change it, that's on the table. Do you want to change? I just don't want to move it to something airy fairy.
All right, well, I'll say for equally 25.
Split equally and makes the 4 towns. Do I have a seconder for that? I do, and Councillor Sol. Speakers to this, we now have an amendment moved and seconded. So the amendment is it split 25% to each of the 4 towns and split equally amongst the 4 for a one-off process. I assume you still agreed with the part referred to the long-term plan committee and the research. Okay, speakers, Councillor Mobench.
Could I give notice of a further amendment? That if this one is defeated, I would move that in fact that we defer it until we've done the economic review.
Well, at this stage, it would go back to the original motion that's been moved by myself, being that split that was presented in the papers. So speakers to the equal split, Councillor Daly.
Yeah, I can't agree with this. Can't agree with this one. Already, this is a district-wide rate, $10 per property across the district. I know we've got other district-wide rates that theoretically get split up in equal proportion across the district, but this one, we've got Katikati, Waihi Beach. Their community board area is the whole rating base. The Kaimai Aomakaroa one is just the Aomakaroa Peninsula, Te Puke, just Te Puke community board area. Yet we've got that whole hinterland outside of Te Puke. 56% of the eastern ward are not covered by a community board, and yet they're all contributing to this. And you want to give all the money 75% of the money they've given will go to that western side of the ward. I mean, I really think, as mentioned in the paper, that consideration should be given to some of the smaller centres like Makatu, Paengaroa, Pukahina, Pongakawa for some sort of distribution as well, because they've been paying into this fund for the whole time, and there's been no benefit coming back to that side of the district since 2010 when Te Puke one expired. But I think I'm happy with the amendment to do a distribution of this year's fund, but I think there should be some proportionality to the smaller areas that are missing out, if that's possible.
Councillor Scrooger.
Yes, similar to Grant, I'd have to speak against the allocation basis that Murray's proposing. I mean, it's fair enough to say the example he cited of Aomakaroa, that there's people outside the community board area that see Aomakaroa as their centre, but to nothing like the extent that Grant cited, perhaps in Te Puke. Katikati, again, it's covered because all the area is part of that community board area. So while I agree with the fundamental premise of have a distribution and review, I don't agree with the allocation process.
Thank you. Councillor Sol.
Mr. Chair, I basically will and have seconded that motion. I don't, and that will come forward later, whatever happens here. But I actually feel that we've lost the whole principle of what this was designed for. It was designed to help the communities develop better communities their shop frontages, so to speak, their shopping centres, their town centres.
Hmm.
Now, it was designed to give them a decent dollop of money so they could do something with it. Now, 50 grand, for instance, that I look at, so I will be parochial here, 50 grand barely buys you a motor car these days. Okay, and that's what we're going to get into Waihi Beach, all right? And if you extend that, so we get $200,000. Look, how many yards of footpath does that buy? Look, we just got to realise that to get decent sums of money, we need to be able to do this, and we need to be able to capitalise on the growth across the district to make our centres look better. The next part of this then, sir, is I say Waihi Beach again. Waihi Beach is by far at times the biggest centre in this whole district by thousands of people. But it comes in at the bottom end. It's not designed as a growth node. So it, again, doesn't get any development. So 50 grand a year, as I say, it won't even pay a townsman if we could get one. For goodness sake, let's start improving our whole village type attitude or places, and let's start making it happen. By continuing with this fund, I would believe we can do something. If you want to move some of those places, perhaps that you feel don't benefit from it, out of it, okay. But, you know, I reckon, I quite agree with the smaller towns missing, not getting a bit of a look in on some of the money. But again, sir, the fact is that these towns also exist in my area. I've got little villages dotted along the coast, etc. And maybe they could do with it, but they haven't got a village as such, as a frontage. I also think that when Waihi Beach has all these people there, it's got to provide for a city when it's getting a village bloody contribution from our council. Sorry, sir, a village contribution. It's just not really well balanced, and it just gives nothing really to the future. And meanwhile, the people that live in Pukehina probably go to Te Puke and get the benefit. So to me, it's just not well balanced there. But for the sake of getting some progress and getting something looked at longer term, I support my fellow councillor from the formerly from the Omokara Community Board as chair, and Kaimai Ward councillor with his motion.
Thank you for that support in favour of the amendment. Any further speakers to the amendment?
Sorry, point of order. Can you just repeat what the amendment says, please?
The amendment is the allocation of this as a one-year basis for 25, 25, 25, 25.
I've got a draft here for you, James, and it is very draft. Recommended, that it be recommended to council that the town centre development rate be allocated on an equal basis, being 25% equally amongst the following four towns, being Te Puke, Katikati, Waihi Beach and Mokoro.
Okay, so I'll speak to the amendment if I may, Mr. Chairman. I think whether it's proportional basis or 2025, 25, 25 for a holding period is scarcely neither here nor there. It would only be a few thousand in it, frankly. The bigger question, which I'm hearing from Councillor Sol, is about different forms of allocation and whether it's lumpy or whether it's Pukehina gets any. There's a whole different question there, which is best done through our economic activity review. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the amendment if that's just a fair way forward, and then support the motion I seconded originally, and then we can take this forward through the LTP and our strategy review and have a really good discussion. But I think today is not the time to discuss whether Pongaroa is missing out or whether the holiday homes in Waihi Beach need some taken account of, whatever. That's a much deeper discussion, I think. Thanks.
Councillor Murray Bench.
Speak against the amendment. I think that I'd prefer to see us hold off and take a look at it through the economic review. I think Alan Sol has raised a really important issue, and a village that grows to a town at a certain time of the year, you've then got all these little centres that we've heard about in Te Puke. I'd like to see it all taken into account when we did a full review, which we will do in our economic review. So I'm all for, and I think my mate on the right is going to move it, the amendment, future one to hold off.
Sorry, I was just getting schooled up on standing orders here, in danger of losing an original motion and a amendment. Look, I will speak to it briefly. I do represent a part of the district that has 5,500 properties that pay towards this. By far the biggest. It receives nothing. It hasn't done for 16 years. I acknowledge that the towns have a problem. I really moved the initial part. I don't see it as a big issue for just a 1 year basis to move it. I think there's a bigger discussion that to be had, and I think Alan raised, Councillor Sol raised that, Councillor Daly raised that on smaller centres. So I believe that work needs to be done. I really only moved it for the sake of giving it. It is a one-off sugar hit. It gives each of the towns, however we split it, a cake, we can all scrap and fight over it. But I think I'm speaking against the 25-25-25 split. I do support, because I moved it, the original allocation for 1 year, and then a big piece of work about the whole future of it going forward. But I'm about to be tested in my standing orders. If both of these fail, it might, Councillor Murray Bench might get a wish and it might lay on the table. So any further speakers? Mr. Crawford.
Yeah, I think I just agree with what Margaret said too. I think that we should, because there's a scrap over, who should get a percentage? I reckon we should hold it until it gets reviewed. Yeah. Yeah, because I just, I know that, it's for the town centres what it's been in the past, but I think because it's getting reviewed and it could be distributed elsewhere, I think we should hold it until we decide.
Right, so I take that you're speaking against the amendment. That's fine. No further speakers. I will put the amendment as it was moved, 25-25, 25-25 split. All those in favour, please say aye. 3. Those against? I declare it lost. No. Foreshadowed amendment. Yep.
Get the basics right. I would move that we stop gathering this money until we complete the review. We're in a cost of living crisis, right? We know we're under pressure to keep rates down, yet we keep saying things like, this is only a small matter, this is only a small matter, this is only a small matter. Guess what? The small matters add up. If we take $10 off people's uniform annual charge, then I think that would be more welcome, frankly, than the little bit of money that we're going to put in each pot. Secondly, there are, and Alan's raised this already, large areas of the district contributing to this that do not get any benefit out of it. I agree with, if that was his position, I agree with former Mayor Webber that this is actually not a good scheme, right? The people up the Kaimais put money in, Te Puna puts money in.
Well, do you want to move the amendment and then we'll all have a chance to speak to it under our
I've
standing
already
rules?
moved it.
Sorry?
What
is it?
The move that we put this funding and we stop gathering this funding until the review is completed.
So that's for next year's annual plan you're talking
In the
about,
long-term
but we
plan.
have rated this year. We do have a sum
our
of money
advice-
sitting in the
Our
bank.
advice was that would then go into the council surplus, which presumably would end up in the rating reserve.
Hold it,
Yeah. That was our advice from Gary. So we just cut it for now and look at,
ring fence it.
So if I just can clarify for me,
yeah,
you are
Ring fence it.
foreshadowing that this funding is not allocated to the measure.
not gathered or allocated until this matter.
No, I think you're confusing. You're talking about next year's annual plan, which is dealt with tomorrow. That's not an issue here today. We're talking about the 230,000
Okay,
that's
so
already
what
been
What
collected.
Gary was saying was that if we decided not to continue this, that would go into the general council surplus for this year and be
Yeah, but
available.
you're talking about next year
Yeah.
as well, which we're not empowered to do that here. That's an annual plan decision that will be made at the
Okay,
annual
we'll
plan.
put on let's put on the agenda for tomorrow. But certainly I would say that we don't spend it this year, that it goes into the general council surplus.
Hold the fund until the review.
Well, I mean, it's
Two different things then.
yeah, it's two different things there. And the reason why I say what I'm saying, is that I think any money we don't spend this year is available to help keep the rates down next year.
So if I can clarify, that means will not be allocated this year and be retained by council.
Yeah.
That's what will go through to the recommendation to the council meeting.
Yeah.
Just in the meantime, I'll need to check with Rachel's team because it was signalled in the LTP that it was there, so it's not significant. Presumably council can make that decision to change it. But I just run.
Yeah, well, I was running on your advice here.
Yeah, no, and that's what I think it'll work, but I just rather not confirm that, but your direction to the council, so remember this is a recommendation to council, is that you, again, not be allocated for 22-23.
And that's seconded by councillor Murray-Bench. Right, speakers to the further amendment.
Yeah.
Just, if the money's there, is it able to go into, if the money's collected as a town centre rate, is it able to go into the general rate reserve as councillor Joyce has said, or does it have to be ring fenced?
It's part of the UAGC.
Okay, so it's not itemised.
It's not a separate rate.
Okay, thank you.
Can I speak to my amendment, please?
No, you don't should always apply.
No, he's not getting right to reply. He's speaking to his amendment. He can do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, people have their own views anyway. I mean, yeah, as I started to say, and I probably did get things in the wrong order because I'm new. Sorry about that. We're in a cost of living crisis. We want to keep the rates increased down. Is this a huge sum of money? No, it's not. But the problem is we keep getting told that every sum of money is small and therefore it's not worth doing. Well, I'm sorry, but if you keep doing that, they become significant over time. There is an alternative model. I mean, I understand what Alan's saying, but Katikati, as Rachel has pointed out, has a separate town development rate of $20 per property per year, and there's $500,000 in that account. So, that model works. And I would invite councillors to think about, let's look at this and all the questions raised as part of the economic development review, which hopefully will be in time for the long-term plan, because obviously, it will be part of the long-term plan. And let's look at it then, and let's give a little bit of relief to ratepayers in the meantime. And then we can bring it back and look at it on a better basis when it comes time to look at the long-term plan.
Perhaps I'll just clarify, the funds that are in the Katikati account are a mixture of the $20 rate and the balance of the district-wide funding that have gone into it. So the $500,000 has not come from the $20 rate.
So how much was the balance? Is there any idea?
Oh, no, there's two different figures, but there's two different funding sources that are in that reserve. So
I guess my point was the $20 rate that's levied on Katikati has been allowed to build up, and that is an alternative model to taking from one end of the district to give to the other.
Further speakers to the amendment? Councillor Mayor Denia.
I can't support this one. This is making rating decisions on the hoof. We've got a strategy conversation coming up. Community boards will be vocal if they think they're accumulating this money and then suddenly we take it away. This is just bad decision making.
Councillor Salt.
Mr. Chair, basically I support the mayor in that particular principle indeed. It's doing it on the hoof at present, and as has been made clear, the money has already been collected. Yes, it's in a UAC. You'll look at what else can be done, I guess, if the motion gets through at some point. But to me, it's not good and I couldn't support it.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
I support the motion, sir. We're not making decisions on the hoof. We've had the report. We've had the advice that we are going to have an economic review. And it's really important that we have an open mind when we come to that. If this money can save our ratepayers in any way this term, I think it's important that we do so. It isn't hoof making. The council is the authority for the district, and we are entitled to have an opinion and to actually implement a policy decision around this table. So I stand by and support the amendment.
Councillor Granger.
I do not support the amendment. This scheme has been running for 16 years. It's been well known about. It's been in the long-term plans. It's not a surprise to anybody. And as the mayor says, making decisions about this and rating decisions over this matter at this moment is not the right thing to be doing. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Any further speakers to the amendment? Councillor Daly.
Yeah, I'd like to support it, Rodney, but I just, for reasons everyone else has given, I don't think I can support it. In principle, I fully support this town centre rate principle because how else does any of these small centres get this sort of fund to develop their town centres? And so if it's left to build up, then it can still be spent at some point, whatever basis that's given. So a full review is needed in terms of going forward, and certainly need to take into account some other centres than was originally envisaged, because you know these smaller towns have been crying out for something like this, and how else are you going to give them some pūtea to play with other than something like this? So I won't be supporting this motion amendment.
Councillor Henry.
I can't support it either. While I can understand your sentiments, Councillor Joyce, I hear in the report that says it is entirely a councillor's decision. But in terms of the fact that it's been going for 16 years, I feel that it's a decision that we can't make without waiting for the review, which I believe that the community board should be involved in, and then we can make that decision. Consultation is vital for our rep with our communities. We don't always do it as well as we can, and I believe that we need to wait for that review before any decision is made.
Any further speakers? There are none. All those who support pretty much putting in the bank, was it? Is that what it was? I mean, oh, sorry. Not distributing the general fund collected. Yep.
For the 22-23.
Yep. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? I declare it lost. The original decision, which is the distribution, first proposed 64,000 to Te Puke, 50,000 to Waihi Beach, 74,000 to Kerikeri, and Omokoroa 37,000 for one-off year. It was moved by Thwaite, second by Kenya. Do I have speakers to this?
I wanted to move another amendment.
Can understanding what?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, even though
For 25, 25, 25?
he moved an amendment.
I moved an amendment.
You can, okay. Councillor Granger, we're in your hands. This is standing orders 101 in live action. Go, Councillor Granger.
That the current funds in the town centre development rate be set aside pending the financial review and the long-term plan and the things of the future, and the decision as to its final use be made following that review.
I believe that's identical to the motion that Councillor Joyce moved and put, virtually identical, same intent. That was the intent.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No.
Well, unfortunately, understanding orders, I'm the chairman and I get the final rule, and I rule that that's the same, so I rule that one out, sorry. Any further amendments before I go back to the original distribution model to even test that? You might get your wish yet by voting that down. Councillor Daly, you wish to move in further amendment?
I just want to question your authority to overrule his amendment.
Do you want to question my authority for you to stay in this room, or?
I was prepared to second the amendment, but
Okay, we've sorted that out. I've ruled we're going to put the original motion that distribution for 1 year, that was what was put for 1 year, pending the other review and the long-term plan for 64, 50, 74 and 37 occur this year. Yes, you are now. We've finally got it. That's the motion on the table. You can speak to it.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I
Deputy
guess
Mayor.
having been through this process of all the amendments, I have to reluctantly support this. And I say very reluctantly because, as I say, it's like the example, Kati, all those people in the hinterland, their $10 contributes to something in their town. If you take Te Puke, people like myself, our $10 gets spread all around the district and doesn't go to the town that I support and value. And so I have to say, I still don't think it's fair.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Deputy Mayor, Mayor, sorry to downgrade you.
I am supporting this motion, so I seconded it. I think it's the best thing to do for now, and I look forward to the discussion over the next year or so about how we might tweak this, change it, and have that deeper discussion, whether it's smaller centres, whether it's a changed amount. I think $10 is probably too small at this point. It's deflated over the last 15 years. So, but anyway, we can have that discussion, and I support this motion.
Councillor Sol.
Mr. Chair, I cannot support the motion. Basically, in fact, using the Deputy Mayor's principle, I actually say that he does have a town and it's called Te Puke, and that's one that he would naturally gravitate to. I also believe that we have people maybe that live within our Katikati ward that actually probably don't go to Katikati either because it's going that way. In fact, they would be more likely to go to Waihi Beach. And that's the truth of the matter because it's their beach. It's their little place to go. It's the shopping centre that a lot of those women like to go to. And we need to keep that enlivened. But the situation is, sir, that there are lots of people that go that way. We extended that ward, and yet those people at times struggle to have an association with Katikati as a prime example. I cannot support it, sir. I just feel that Waihi Beach just gets a dirty end of a stick again, and that's where I sit.
Councillor Crawford, speak to it.
Just have clarification on that motion. So that amount that's there to go to the towns, that's pending on the review, correct?
No,
So
that's distribution for this year.
So we're
and
going
then
to
review going forward.
So we're deciding on this motion, we'll distribute that and then have the view. Okay, because I'm more supportive of that. It gets held until we review. So I don't know which motion that fits underneath, but that's my opinion.
Murray's one.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Could I ask for a clarification? If this motion fails, what do we do then?
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, I'll speak against this motion because I really believe that the option that Murray proposed as an amendment is actually a better short-term option than this for the reasons that we've already explained, and I'd really like to see this fail and let us, despite your objection, Don, come up with an amendment or a new motion that allows us to do that.
Further speakers to the motion. Councillor Granger, followed by Joyce.
I won't be supporting the current motion. I think it's just ad hocery, numbers plucked out of the air, and it has no relevance. We need to think about, we've rated this money for town centre development, and those numbers are not going to develop anything anywhere of significance for anybody, and it's just ad hocery, and we ought to make a proper decision what's done with that 200,000.
Thank you. Yep, that's fine. We didn't break the standing orders. Councillor Green. Joyce, yes.
You said you were asked for speakers too. Okay.
For you to tell me your view.
And all that business. I'll speak against as well. I'm sorry, but this is a poorly targeted system. You know, I mean, you've talked about Te Puna, so there's nothing wrong. The people from Te Puna don't look to a Mokoroa to go shopping.
That's true.
And the people at Kaimais, they don't get nothing from this, you know. Makatū gets nothing from this, right? You know, even the people from Te Poki who say, well, you know, we're not getting a fair share, they're getting the second biggest share from this, and they don't think it's fair. I really, really think, you talk about ad hocery, this is ad hocery at its worst. We're spending money without having a clear idea of the benefits, because we know it's not a good system and we want to change it, but we're going to spend the money anyway. I mean, how is that good governance?
Councillor Henry.
Yeah. Whilst I understand the difficulty here, because I'm going to be voting in favour of, in support of option 2. But I do feel that some of the problem, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I think some of the problems are the fact that we're looking at this now, nearly partway through a year, when we should have been looking at it before, and we would have been able to be bringing it to our communities, hopefully. But now we're looking at something that we're going to bring to our communities later. We're making a decision about this money. And so I would not like to see us going into, I realise why we've got to make this decision now. We can't lock ourselves into another 4-year cycle to get that money, because we don't know what the outcome of the review is going to be. And that's why I would be voting for this in abeyance till we wait and find out what's going to be the outcome of the review.
Point of order, sir. The member just spoke about option 2. Are you supporting options 2 and 4?
This is for the distribution, and you're aware of that?
So point 3.
2 and 4.
Sorry.
Hang on, I need to go back.
Clarification. Clarification. One of the issues here is that it's referred to differently in different parts of the paper. So the recommendation is referred to as recommendation 4. Further down the paper, it's referred to as option 2.
Yeah, that's
what would be really helpful is that when we get these reports, that we use the same classifications all the way
Point taken.
through.
Okay.
And that would
if I
make it
can
easier
bring
for
you
everybody
back
to keep
to
up.
speaking to and for or against my recommendation.
Point of order, if I may.
sorry.
I just have a query, because at this point, if we, let's say 4 is voted down, then either it's unclear whether option 3 is the default, as it were. If it's neither, then actually by default we've gone effectively with Murray's one, which would be a sort of perverse result, since we voted against Murray's one.
If it is.
If this-
It has not put an amendment before.
Okay, so here is a clarification on standing orders. If this does fail, another amendment, someone who has not put a previous amendment or seconded can put up a further amendment option if they so desire. And if we haven't got any of those in the room, it'll have to lie on the table. So I will speak now. If I haven't had a right of reply at all. Excuse me, I haven't had a right of reply because it hasn't come back to this motion. We've been only debating amendments up to now. This is the first time I've spoken
Point
to
of order, Mr. Chairman. You did speak to the amendment and you called it your right of reply, and your secretary will be able to tell you you've used your right of reply. It's fundamental. You can't.
didn't-
You did speak to you had your right of reply, sir, when you spoke at the amendments, and you said it was your right of reply. I'm having it now.
I've had clarification here. My right of reply cannot be to an amendment I have either not moved nor second. Well, I'm afraid I'm overruling that. I'm going to have my speak now. Today, I've seen the worst display of behaviour by a bunch of councillors elected to govern $150 million budget next week, and everyone suddenly turned on their own little patch and what they got out of it, which I think is not good. I acknowledge that this is not perfect long forward. I really moved this to just move us forward in the hope that it would be a 5-minute exercise, but it's turned into a lot bigger than that. So if you really want to save some money, bring your debating skills to the annual plan budget. If you really want to cut and thrust and save money, this has no impact at all on rating for next year because it is not committed to it. It is not committed to next year, but I'll leave it at that. So I will put that distribution as recommended for. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Declare it lost.
Make a suggestion, Mr. Chair, for you.
Yep. Yeah, look, I believe we should leave this lie on the table and come back to the next meeting. Probably to the council meeting, it'll be in that time frame. Yeah, later. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, and 3 lying on the table. Moved, Scrum, seconded, Sol. I'll put that all in favour. Those against, carried. Thank you. Last few slides on Jim's projects. We're back to that. We've got a picture of a crane and talking to some work down at number 4 road still, are we?
So next slide.
Yeah, sorry, no 50,000 for your committee. Right, Jim. Oh, crisis response.
Yeah, it's probably me, Mr. Chair. So there's just probably a couple of things that you might be interested in. So one of the questions we've got is through the teams, there's 2 storm events, anniversary weekend and Cyclone Gabrielle, is there was some thought that maybe we hadn't explained how we manage events particularly well to you, and whether you had sufficient understanding of the different components that or how we manage them, and then the transition between the types of events. And so essentially we have 4 categories: incident management team, which tends to be infrastructure related and more BAU; a crisis management team, which is more internal; business continuity plans, which is just more really operational; and then when we go into a CDM emergency, either declaration or activation. So we go to the next one. So what we've got, and you've got these on the slide, so I won't go through them, but particularly we look at an external event, incident management team. So the incident management team are the generally the activity managers that are involved in it, plus communications and plus customer services. And that would be for a normal, typical small storm event. We started it in this model for anniversary weekend, and then after anniversary weekend, we shifted to an activated EOC because we needed more resources. But that's typically the type of event that we how we respond. And the IMT tends to be set up by any of my staff that go, we need to set something up because it's just a bit bigger than a single BAU response, particularly when we're needing more communications or potentially more resources internally. The next one is the crisis management team. Crisis management team tends to be the senior leadership team plus 1 or 2 experts, and it's particularly internally focused or council specific. So cyber attack, this building burns down, internal like pandemic that it takes out half our staff. So it's about how we manage the business or the components of the business. And in terms of that, it's literally the CEO, the second tier managers, third tier managers can go, this is going on, we need to put the crisis management team together, which is essentially getting the senior people who know the stuff together at the time to be able to formulate the response. And then the last one, business continuity plans. Again, it's just the smaller stuff. So we've got business continuity plans for our activities, and in them they've got procedures for what happens when something occurs. And then the last one is the Civil Defence Emergency Management, or when we have the Emergency Operating Centre. So we've set that up twice. And so going into Cyclone Gabriel, we had a duty controller. So Scott, Peter, in this case, were the duty controllers. They were liaising with the mayor, as the mayor is the decision maker in terms of whether we need to declare or not. They're also liaising with the group in terms of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, and also getting information through our teams in terms of what was going on. And we can activate the EOC, which is tends to happen in here, whether or not we declare. So it's not about actually declaring an emergency. We often will activate leading up to it, because the more prepared you are and the more information you've got, then it helps that assessment as to whether you declare. And so that's often more for a slower moving event, such as the cyclone. If it's a fast event like an earthquake, then you just go, bang, we want to set up, and there's a process to do that. So that's essentially the 4 different components that we have in terms of responding to the different types of crises or emergency events. Very brief snapshot. Is there any questions on that, or any comments about the information you were receiving and how you felt through those last 2 events?
Councillor Murray.
Could I ask, has our mayor got the authority to call all emergencies if he needs to? Does he have to come under at any stage the regional civil defence monitoring?
So I think what you're asking, and just give you a bit of timeline on this one. So I declared a state of emergency. That lasted 22 minutes. And at which point, I was wondering if it was a record, but yes. And then the regional declared their state of emergency, which superseded mine. And then the next day, national did that. So that superseded regional. So yes, I could and did declare and did do what I needed to do, but it became bigger quite quickly.
Richard Crawford, Councillor Crawford.
Just commenting at the Makatu Community Board we were at last night, there a big conversation came up on the town didn't really have the community plan clearly, sort of unified, and there was a lot of disruption. And that was one of those places like Little Waihi Beach, where there was actually evacuation alert went to the low-lying flooding areas, but the coordination and that was just a mess. So I was just, it really highlights the need for making sure before, another event comes, that these community response teams and emergency management teams, which generally seems to come through the community boards where the community boards are, or the ratepayers, whatever, who else is running them in the other outlying areas. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that, Kerry, because it was something that got strongly debated, and there was a lot of upset in Makatu last night.
Councillor Sol.
So I just wish to basically support that as well. And it's something that became quite obvious at last night's community board meeting, that they had lots of little issues there. Well, no, they could have been big issues. Shouldn't call them little. Lots of issues. And I would think that actually it may be a good idea if we were able to get our emergency response people to contact the community board to start facilitating this, to generate a new and sustainable community response plan and team.
Look, we're aware of Makatu and we're aware of there's some different parties in Makatu. And the plans had already been in place to bring them together before we had these events. It's just the timing didn't work out for us. So absolutely what you're suggesting, Councillor Salt, is what's happening.
Thank you.
And I'd speak to it, I'd just add beyond the community boards, I think all our communities are in it. We have a community committee now, Councillor Mobeen. So to me, a report going forward showing that the whole area is covered, regardless if they're on a community board or not, would be a good report for Councillor Mobeen's committee to receive and show that we have it as a document and it exists.
Yes, sir. Actually, I would support that as well, because we tend to, so far, largely have only had issues that involve water. But anytime we could have a major earthquake, could be ash, could be a situation of liquid petroleum gas or a tanker that creates an issue in a community. And I think that could happen anywhere. I think you're quite right. It needs to be more broadly spread now. We've had a fair go at those larger communities.
Yeah, okay, so we can bring something to the community committee. It's not all of the district is covered by community response plans or teams. I mean, sometimes it's up to the communities to do that. It's not something that we support but don't drive. It's up to the communities to go, we need one of these. And I suspect what's happened around the country is showing the need for it.
That was my point. If gaps are identified, then people
We've
could.
got a map covering them all. Yeah.
Right. What else you got for us, Jim? Microphone.
There's the large crane putting in piles at number 4. Is it 300-ton crane, Jim? For 10 grand a day? Yeah. So number 4 road, temporary bridge, plus the other works we've done on that temporary access is at least $1.5 million. Probably only a couple of things to note is just going, and what Kotahi talked about is that our program and how much we're going to achieve this year is still a bit up in the air in terms of the weather. So that is affecting things. We have lost a quarter of our construction season. At the moment, as of last night, we're still going to be hitting about 80, just over 80% in terms of CapEx. But that can change depending on weather and other events.
Margaret, do you have a question, Margaret?
Yes, I look forward to any report. One of the things that came out was from the Mayor of Napier, and the distance between the regional council and Napier was just gigantic. And for us, the hills are fairly remote and they tend to be on their own. And I think our staff have actually handled it really well, and any improvements we can make would be great. But you look at this, 10,000 a day, but we're there doing it. And I think the people in the hills who were so frustrated, but at the same time, the communications has to be as good as we can get.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things that was focused on. So understanding the events, working out what's happened, getting the feedback from our crews on the ground, mapping it, being able to communicate with people who might have been cut off,
Yes.
Getting the releases out, getting the information out. So when you've got an event moving like that, you don't have all the information all the time. It's quite clear that
I forgot to say that for new councillors, this building was built to be a civil defence emergency base. It was very successful.
Grant, you've got a question on this?
Just a quick one, is it not possible to lift some bridge remnants out while that crane is there?
We looked at that, but each of those are 80 tonnes. And so the demolition advice we've got from demolition experts is to break it up where it is and pull it out onto that grass area up the top of the image, just to get it out of the river. So there'll be a rock breaking or concrete breaking and cutting the reinforcing as at least the minimum actions to get bits of that bridge out of there and then pulling it out. Just quickly, the piles, you see the location of the piles there. By using piles, we can shorten the length of the bridge and it gives us more potential for truck trailer turning, which is what we talked about earlier, trying to achieve. It's not guaranteed yet, but we're working on it.
Jim, your last communique, I think, or one of them, you said that traffic management will be in place to monitor the trucks coming across that bridge. Will that stay in place for the whole period of the harvest? Or
Not for managing the bridge. It's the traffic management is managing the detour road.
Well, I mean, you know, we're worried about a truck taking out the Bailey Bridge, its trailer not entering correctly.
Yep.
There'll be someone monitoring that initially, won't there? Or
There will be, but there'll also be protection to the bridge ends. And we'll try and maximise that protection by providing a series of bollards or barrier curb or that sort of thing to try and control driver behaviour, because you only get one driver out of the rest that'll do the damage. So that is our concern.
Right, we'll get the bridge built first and then we'll sort of plan in place. Yep, any further?
So probably from that, just any other questions on that report?
We've exhausted it all today.
Yeah.
Exhausted it all today.
So we just need to receive that report, and then the only other one we've got is when you did the tour around the building previously last year, you had a number of questions raised about our SCADA system. So Henrietta, our expert, it'll just give you a little bit of an update on the recent technological changes in the system. That'll just take a few minutes.
Right, we'll do that. A mover and second for this report here. Councillor Sol, Councillor Crawford, all those in favour? Those against, carried. Right, we moved the order of the SCADA report to the tail end of the committee. Welcome along. Henrietta, welcome. Apologies for a bit of time slippage throughout the day.
SCADA systems.
I'm over the moon. Rodney saved me some.
Okay, hi guys. I'll try and keep it short and sweet because it is the end of the day, and Gary left the most technical part right at the end. So what we had before I came was a really old SCADA system. As you know, SCADA is quite sorry, is it? Oh, does it? Should I try this one? Technology. Yeah, it's quite useful because we get to know the demand that our communities are taking for water, how much wastewater we're putting out there, and it just helps us make infrastructure decisions. What we had before was a very old SCADA system. If you don't know the difference between OT and IT, OT is just a specialized IT. It focuses directly on operations, and in our case, utilities operations. And what we had is we had lack of standards, badly architected, built on just patching, band-aiding solutions and moving on because we didn't have the time and budget to spend quality time on finding decent solutions. So this is what our system used to look like. you can see that everything is kind of scattered everywhere. We've got devices out on the field here, and we've got PLC devices on one side, and the line of communication is not straight. You go through different channels. All that stuff is really costly because you're not using just one bulk communication line, you're using about several. So that can become costly over time. And the other thing that we had was we were also sitting inside our IT corporate infrastructure, and with things like banks and hospitals getting cyber attacked, that's something that we wanted to focus on. So we wanted to make sure that if there was any cyber attacks on our end, that we were highly secured on the utility side, because in America, they had one guy hack into one of their water treatment plants and increase dosing for chlorine. So we had to make sure that we get in before the attackers do. So one of the ways that we do that is actually separating out our OT system from our corporate IT system. And it also becomes really tidy as well. And you'll see as I go. So, this is our phase one. It cost us about 200K to tidy up. You can see that the device network, we've kind of subbed that in and built its own little subnet. And also the telemetry system also got subnetted into their own cluster, so that we weren't having all these different lines of communication. Every line of communication we have means that's another line we have to protect ourselves from cyber attacks. So if we minimize it, we get full on focus and we can monitor systems better. Other things we did while we did that transition was just upgrade us to modern technology. So we moved away from ADSL, from like that dial-up situation, to things as sophisticated as Starlink, which is satellite communication. Then in phase two, this is where I had to decide to just go greenfield. So you can see I've built another duplicate system on the side that's heavily firewalled. And what I did was just one by one, start introducing all the solutions that we've built, tidy them up so that they weren't Band-Aid solutions, and then feed them into the new system so that we can see all the communications that are coming through. And this upgrade also meant we spent about 100 to 200K worth of upgrading just security, patching things up, tidying up solutions. And then when we got to phase three, we were able to decommission all that old stuff. And you can see that we have now a clear line of communication from the device network to the telemetry network to our firewall to our OT, our new OT system. And if I just go back, you can see how people are every user that's coming into the system, you see they're scattered everywhere. This meant that we were endangered of understanding who was actually coming into our network. It could be anybody because we didn't have a clear line of communication. When we get to that stage 3, you can see that no matter what user is coming into our system, we are monitoring them through a firewall. They go through terminal servers, and then that terminal server then allows them into our gated network that sits at the back there. So we just become stronger, like technically. And what we ended up doing is we put some of those databases out on the device network, because if we had things like earthquakes, flooding, anything that could damage our power supply or internet supply, our plants could continue running on those databases. And then once we get the network hooked back in, the database can feed back, and those storages can last 3 years. So if we're in a state of emergency for 3 years, after 3 years, those data can come back to that same network. And all of this is backed up to the cloud if we were to ever have a fire anywhere, and we have a redundancy system on the cloud as well. So you can see the solution now is we went from one really messy solution to a really nice, neat and tidy solution. We added a new alarming system. There was nothing on the market to do what we're doing. We're quite specialized here in Western Bays with the way that we communicate with our maintenance team. So I've added in a new system to allow for that, but the savings that we saved is quite a lot because normally you pay per license. Building this very simple software means that we've got free licensing forever. And it's not a complicated system at all. Any competent software engineer should be able to read through it. It's fully documented. And the SCADA system now has ongoing costs, obviously saving us money on, you know, not having to try and debug where the problems are, because before we just had so many devices everywhere. Now we've just got mainstream line of communication, easy to debug. We just save up on labor, and engineering labor is very expensive. So why do we do all of this? These are just some data that I collect from the system. This is what we give out to our regional council for our compliance. If anything flashes red, it means we're non-compliant. So that month that I took that report, we were fully compliant. Very rare do we get a non-compliant, only if there's a power outage, but that's understandable. And then these are the other type of data we can get. We can get totalized flow, the groundwater usages, how much we're taking out from those aquifers, pump statistics, how many hours those pumps are running, so that we know when the pumps need to be replaced, so that we're not spending too much time trying to invent a solution last minute. We are well prepared. We can see a trending up to 3-4 years on our new system to see when the pumps would need to be replaced. And we hope to do that with the rest of our devices on the network. And that's it. Any questions? Yes.
It's beyond me, but I can see you've got it under control. If the power goes out across the region, can it still work?
Yes, so we have put in those databases, those nodes, we call them nodes. We put them out on the field at the treatment plants, and the PLCs are already programmed to run automatically, and they have hard-coded barriers. So if someone wanted to set it higher than a certain amount of pH or anything like physically, that's all handled with the PLC. So it would stop the plant if it needed to. So it will continue on running, and they will have compliance points set on them so that we keep in compliance. So yes, they can run if we don't have any power there. Well, you'll need a generator, but yeah. Yes, yeah, majority of our major sites have generators, and I think from memory, all our reservoirs, our big reservoirs, can actually supply to our entire community. So if we lost all our sites, we just need one of them running, and they should be able to supply to everybody. It'll just be physically distributed. Yeah.
James, do you have a question? No. Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, actually, I was to.
Thank you, Henrietta, for that update.
You're welcome.
Great
Thank
to
you.
see you've got.
No, well, we're supposed to look after you on those systems.
Well, otherwise, we're trying to keep me on the straight and narrow. Thank you very much. I do. I need a mover and a second to receive the report. Councillor Sol, Councillor Murray Bench, all those in favour? Those against, I declare it carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. I declare the meeting closed at 4:35.